Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Starting to see a very quiet weather stretch settle in for most of the work week that we do have ahead. And of course, when we have these quiet weather stretches, we focus more so on the temperatures. So we'll talk about what you need to expect every morning, every afternoon, and in those evening hours, really the late afternoon hours, because we did have the time change this past weekend. So we are going to see maybe our high temperatures around a different time period each and every day, and we're not going to see too many hours of warmth throughout the day. In fact, most of the day in terms of hours that we are going to see are going to be daylight or are going to be dark outside, and they also are going to correlate to some lower temperatures. But first things first, we did have some overnight showers that lingered in our northernmost counties. You can see some spotty rain fell in our south and our southeastern counties, but it's mainly a line from Perry all the way across over just north of Dublin, across areas like Wrightsville and farther to the north here in central Georgia that saw the bulk of the rain. And the bulk of the rain really wasn't all that much indeed. We can see that most areas are not even equating to 1/10 of an inch of rain that was recorded, like here in Macon. 0.0, so only a couple 1/100ths of an inch of rain that we got up in Bibb County. And then we see maybe some totals upwards to about 1/10 of an inch across Irwinton, Milledgeville, over to Forsyth and Thomaston. And the farther north that you go, you can see some areas of a slightly more profound blue color. So up in Putnam County, Hancock County, where we got just over 1/4 of an inch of rain, and then northern Jasper County, up around the Shadydale area, just north of Monticello, we actually got about 3/4 of an inch of rain. But some totals above that were present farther to the north of us here in central Georgia. This was just a couple of scattered showers that lingered into the overnight hours, but it did allow for some surface moisture, and that resulted in the formation of a lot of fog as you made your way out the door. So it's a pretty gloomy image. Even though we got a bit of an earlier light in that night sky, courtesy of that time change, it was still not the best image that you wanted to walk out the door to. So now we flip the calendar to a new month, the month of November. Here's a look at what we have so far. Obviously, no rain recorded over the 1st or the 2nd. I imagine we'll get some very minuscule amounts recorded for the 3rd day of November once we get those totals officially later on this afternoon. But as of right now, it still stands at 0 rain so far this month. And on average, November, a bit of a wetter month than what we saw in October. On average, we typically see 2 3/4 of an inch of rain. And the record was back in 1992, just over 10 1/4 of an inch of rain at 10.27 inches of rain recorded. So obviously we have another 28 days to go in order to record some form of rainfall to hopefully get us around that average number of just shy of 3 inches. But I imagine after today we'll only have maybe a few 100ths of an inch of rain that we did record on the 3rd day of the month. So for 2025 as a whole, we wrapped up the month of October nearly an inch below what we should have seen for the month. And then right now we are still sitting at about 2/10 of an inch below where we should be 2 days into November. Don't put too much stock into that. We could definitely see a widespread weather maker come through, and it could give us some totals that bump us back into one of those green boxes like we saw in the month of August, June, May, and going all the way back into April and March. And we're still trending above where we should be. At this point in the calendar year as a whole, just shy of 2.5 inches above average. Now, all these numbers were taken as of November 2nd, and we are going to continue to see if maybe some red boxes for the month of November and December finally bring this number back closer to average. But January and February, we did record maybe just shy of about 2 inches below average on what we see in terms of rainfall typically for those months. And then we followed it up with 4 consecutive months where we were above average. We saw a pretty dry July here before we saw a very wet month of August. And then September, October, and now on to November has made for 3 straight red boxes. September also a very dry month where we were nearly 3 inches below where we should have gotten in terms of rainfall. So here's a look at your drought monitor. This is as of last week, and we got this released last Thursday. I actually don't imagine there will be too many changes with this drought monitor. In fact, we may even see some drought conditions worsen, as we are going to take into account all the rainfall that we got past last Tuesday, which was October 28th. So I do believe we had a little bit of rain last Wednesday and maybe a few minuscule sprinkles after that until we got our semi-widespread showers that we got overnight last night into early tomorrow morning. But right now, where things currently stand, all of central Georgia in a moderate drought at the very least, and we can see portions of a severe drought creep into our western counties, creep into our southwestern counties, and creep over into our eastern counties, specifically just Johnson and Emmanuel counties. What we really want to avoid are going to be these areas of red color. So that's going to indicate an extreme drought, and we'll go over all the symptoms and kind of impacts that will have on our forecast if that is to spread into central Georgia. Right now, it's a little bit too close for comfort, but we really could use a couple of widespread rainmakers in the month of November to get out of those dry and those drought conditions. So the main headline is we are kicking off a dry stretch. So I just told you how much we need the rain, and then I follow it up with a headline that says kicking off a dry stretch. I'm just the messenger here. I wish I could bring us some widespread rain. But above average temperatures are going to be in place starting on Wednesday, and that's really for your afternoon high temperatures. Eventually your morning lows will get on board. However, if last week was too chilly for your liking, well, this week is going to be just what the doctor ordered. Rain chances around Saturday into Sunday. We'll go over what we're expecting in terms of what the long-range models have for widespread rain chances possibly, but I think the main headline, at least since you walked out the door this morning, are going to be your sky cams. Finally seeing a glimpse of widespread blue sky. We did not have any glimpses of this whatsoever throughout the foggy and the overcast start to today, but that cloud cover continued to lift, and then eventually it did dissipate in nature. So your visibility looks good to go. No clouds facing to the northeast up here in downtown Macon. Few clouds that we're holding on to across Houston County in portions like Warner Robins, and then just down to the south and the southwest at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. And one lone cloud hanging out right there as we face over to the east in downtown Dublin, but an abundance of blue sky is now translating into a warm up with your temperatures. So you can see that there are some light blue areas that are still trying to hang around into the area, even an upper 40 all the way up in Monticello. But most of central Georgia finds themselves in the mid to upper 50s, 59 degrees in Wrightsville, 59 in Sandersville, a few 60s already. But this does make sense because areas to the east and the southeast didn't have as much cloud cover present this morning, so they got a bit of a quicker warm up than say the rest of central Georgia did. 50 degrees in Rochelle and Cordele, 51 in Unadilla, taking it up to 61 in Swainsboro, but a 63 in Vidalia is our warmest temperature that we do see all across our area specifically. But how does that 63 match up to many of our neighboring cities? 57 in Montgomery, same temperature we have here in Macon, 60 in Panama City, 61 in New Orleans. So Vidalia even warmer than New Orleans here at the 11 a.m. hour. But we're into the low 70s as you go farther down to the south in Florida, 73 in Orlando, 73 in Laredo, and a 70-degree mark over in Houston. But it looks like 73 takes the cake for the warmest temperature in Laredo and in Orlando. This is what we're going to see very prominently and a lot more frequently over the next couple of months as we are now well into the fall season. In fact, probably closer to winter than we are the beginning of fall as of now. But there is lots and lots of cooler air that is up to the north of us, up in the Appalachian Mountains, and a little bit to the west of that, back over into central Tennessee and northern Kentucky. 43 degrees in Nashville and a 45-degree mark up in Lexington. Dew point temperatures are showing a very dry atmosphere. These numbers have been maybe popping up into the 50s on occasion, but overall we don't see any shades of light green, so that's going to correlate to nothing really in the way of rain chances. But it's not just us, it's many states over to the west. It is northern Florida, even those Gulf Coast areas that are typically more humid, you don't find any light green whatsoever. We can see some shades of it, however, over to the east, back up into the Carolinas, specifically coastal South Carolina and North Carolina, and that's going to be closer to where a center of low pressure is that brought us our overnight showers. And the breeze has finally started to fall apart just a little bit. The blue color is very widespread early this morning. We saw some sustained winds, maybe up to around 13 miles per hour, but right now we actually still have the occasional gust above that, up to 17 miles per hour in Swainsboro, 17 miles per hour in Cochran, 12 mile per hour sustained breeze down in Toombs County. But these winds not going to be terribly gusty throughout this afternoon, not really going to pose any impact to your forecast. But if it does build back in for the morning hours tomorrow, we'll have to talk about some of those wind chill values like we were talking about this morning. Many of your values were somewhere in the mid to upper 40s, but your feels like numbers were in the lower half of the 40s, even 40 degrees at the lowest. but very thankfully not down into the 30s like we saw yesterday. 35 was your recorded low here in Macon, 67 degrees for high temperatures. So both those numbers a good amount below average. 67 degrees is actually 6 degrees below your average high of 73. 35 was 11 degrees below your average low of 46 degrees this time of year. I don't think I've really paid attention to how much this number has just continued to drop over the last couple of days. Yes, the mid 40s are kind of the normal now that we're heading into the month of November this time of year. And we were well off some of the records. 88 degrees for a high temperature. Now, we very well could see some 80s by the time we get into the end of the work week. I don't think we're going to be in the upper end of the 80s, but 26, your morning low, that was back just 2 years ago. In 2023, a morning low temperature of 26 degrees recorded. No rain recorded yesterday, so your year departure of rain, we already touched on that, just below 2.5 inches above where we should be for the year as a whole. But the biggest change that we've seen on this almanac graphic was yesterday. Take a look at your sunrise time. Before 7 p.m. now, 6:53 in the morning. Yesterday, we got a better image of that actual sunrise. This morning, definitely not so much. We got a brief image of it in downtown Dublin. Then the clouds overtook the atmosphere and made it a very gloomy start to the day. But don't worry, we'll get a very clear image over the next couple of days of that sunrise just before 7 a.m. And sunset, 5:43. You probably noticed that if you were like myself watching the Bills-Chiefs game yesterday, it was getting dark already right there around halftime. And of course, that is going to continue to be a common theme over the month of November, December, into most of January until we finally get somewhere in the spring where we see those sunsets get later and later, maybe back to a more normal time, say around 7 p.m. So hour by hour, your temperature warm-up can now finally ensue now that we have the breaks in cloud cover, and they will continue to climb into the 60s by the midday hour and the upper 60s as we head into the warmest portion of the afternoon. Now, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, and we have been talking about it as of recent weeks. That 3, 4, and 5 o'clock window has been when we typically see our afternoon highs. We'll go ahead and shift that forward about an hour. So now from about 2 to 4 p.m., it's going to be that window where we hit the high temperatures. And then as we go into 5 p.m., that's really close to sunset. So we are going to begin to see the temperatures drop just a little bit. And eventually going into 6 p.m., the sun is already set. So we see a quicker fall off, got jumbled on my words right there. 60 degrees for a temperature as we roll into the early evening hours. Yes, that's even borderline late afternoon territory, but we're going to have to kind of change our frame of reference now that we've had this time change over the course of this past weekend. Nothing but sunny skies for the rest of today. High temperature of 68 is what I went with. So pretty similar feeling to how yesterday afternoon did feel, just with less cloud cover. And the reason that we're not seeing temperatures, say, closer to average is going to be because yes, we had the cloud cover present in the morning hours, so that kind of slowed the warm up for just a little bit. Not as much time that we are going to be allowed to warm up in light of the mostly clear skies. However, as we keep the clear skies in the forecast, we will steadily see those high temperatures get a little bit higher and a little bit higher, but on the cooler side for your Monday afternoon. Still pretty pleasant though. Upper 60s each and every afternoon has felt like quite the treat. And speaking of your sunrise and sunset times, this is what they were yesterday, 6:53 a.m. and 5:42 p.m. I know that's about an hour or about a minute of fluctuation in terms of your sunset. But as we transition into December 1st, so the first day of the next month, which is going to be in about another 28, 29 days, your sunrise is going to go all the way back to past 7:15 in the morning. The sunrise gets later and later and later as we go into the shortest day of the year, which will be December 21st. And then we'll have a 7:33 a.m. sunrise. Then your sunset, the earliest that we'll have is 5:27 p.m. And then as we transition into the first day of winter, 5:32 p.m. So your sunset maybe 5 minutes later than the earliest time that it should set. But overall, you should expect around 10 hours of daylight for the entire month of December. These are kind of the important dates to look out for. And as we continue to cross off dates and hit those dates, we will start to give you a look at what's ahead into the future, going into January and going into February, and where we kind of transition into that springtime period sometime in March. But satellite and radar picture looks like this currently. So there are still a few clouds as you make your way down I-75 in counties like Dooley, Pulaski, Dodge, Telfair, and cloud cover still covering most of Chris County and Wilcox County. So remember our temperature map, these areas were sitting around 50, 51 degrees as opposed to mid and upper 50s all across the rest of central Georgia. So they've kept the cloud cover present a little bit longer, and that has resulted in some slightly cooler temperatures in areas that are typically a little bit warmer than the rest of the bunch. The farther south that you travel, of course, this time of year, you definitely start to have some of those slightly warmer temperatures as you go closer and closer to the equator. I know it's only a minuscule amount in central Georgia, but that's still going to result in normally some warmer numbers farther down to the south, and we saw that present with Vidalia. Satellite and radar shows patchy cloud cover that's kind of popped up out of nowhere. These were your foggy areas this morning, and we've continued to see that fog lift up higher in the atmosphere and then eventually dissipate as we've gone throughout the rest of your morning. Here's a look at future view. Not much to talk about whatsoever. I don't have a pause point playing whatsoever on the course of the next 3 days. It's once we get to Wednesday that, hey, maybe some clouds are back in the forecast as we go into Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. Maybe a few sprinkles within that cloud cover, but we're really not talking rain chances whatsoever. And that's going to be very good for your election day forecast and really a good warming trend over the next 3 days. So 68 for a high temperature today. We had that 10% chance in the early morning hours of seeing rain, but then we go up to 71 tomorrow. No rain chances for your election day forecast, into 76 as we go into Wednesday. But morning low temperatures right there around the 40-degree mark. I said it earlier this morning, and I think it really kind of tells the story with your forecast. It's one of those weeks where your laundry hamper is going to get full very quickly because you're going to have to pack the layering to wear as you walk out the door, but be prepared to shed that layering as you go into the afternoon, just utilizing a little bit more of your closet day by day throughout the first part of your work week. And in terms of your election day forecast, we'll have you covered for everything that you need to know on 13 WMAZ and 13 WMAZ Plus tomorrow evening, so make sure that you're tuning in for all those local races. It's obviously not as big of an election year as last year was with the presidential election, but still many local races that we're keeping an eye on. Of course, the Warner Robins mayoral race and a couple other mayoral races all across the area, including some E-SPLOST and some SPLOST votes. Well, it's green check boxes as you go out to the poll at any point of the day. The only thing you're going to need to know is if you're planning on going before work or you're planning on going to the polls, say, after work. That's when your chillier temperatures will be present. So it looks like we start out somewhere in the mid-40s right there around sunrise at 7 a.m. We continue to make the climb into the 50s by 9 a.m., into the 60s by about 11 a.m., and we don't stop there. We actually go into the 70s tomorrow. So once again, the 2, 3, and 4 o'clock window when we're going to hit our high temperature right there around 70, 71. Wouldn't even doubt that a couple areas hit the 72-degree mark. But then we go closer to 5 p.m. We start to get closer to sunset, and we do see those numbers drop down eventually into the upper 50s if you have plans to head out to the poll right there before 7 a.m. And a quick reminder, your polls will close at 7 p.m. So make plans to maybe leave work a little bit early to make sure you get in line, because once you get past 7 p.m., they will not be allowing anyone else to enter wherever you are voting. So keep that in mind for your election day forecast for tomorrow. Morning low temperatures. Each of the next 3 days, we actually see a steady cooling trend. Well, today was a little bit warmer because we had the clouds present. Not going to have the clouds present the next 2 mornings, so that will result in some cooler temperatures. 41 degrees as you walk outside on Tuesday morning, 40 degrees on Wednesday, and then we start to see the warming trend back up to average of 46 as we walk out the door on Friday. But 46 compared to 40 degrees, it's basically going to feel the same. It's going to be nice and chilly as you walk out the door each and every morning. Go ahead and get used to that. That's what typical fall weather feels like, and it's going to be even chillier as we transition, of course, into winter in the month of December. Your afternoon high temperatures, well, they see a warming trend starting today into tomorrow. Mid-70s by the time we roll into Wednesday. You saw that on the next 3 days graphic. That's already 3 degrees above average, but we continue the climb. We are on the cusp of the 80s Thursday and Friday. I wouldn't doubt that we see some of these models trend even higher. Typically what the models say is a little bit lower than maybe what is to happen about 3 to 5 days out. So we very well could be forecasting some 80s for the end of the work week on Thursday and on Friday. And in terms of your humidity levels, they're obviously very dry right now. You just saw that on the dew point temperatures graphic, and they'll continue to remain dry, but maybe a slight bump up by the time we roll into Thursday and Friday, but really a more significant bump up maybe back into this humid box when we roll into Saturday and of course when we roll into Sunday, and that's going to correlate to your better rain chances that we do have in the near future. So here's a look at your long-range models. Thursday afternoon, still looking crystal clear. We may have a few sprinkles for the early morning hours on Thursday, but that's not even enough for me to really throw a rain chance on your 7-day forecast. Now we go into Friday, 5 p.m. Okay, maybe some high school football games kicking off the first round of the playoffs this week, or finishing up the regular season. And then 5 p.m., it is looking like we're good to go here. But we do see, it looks like signs of a frontal boundary starting to drive through the south and the southeast United States. So 5 p.m. right there, not too much model agreement, but it does look like pretty organized rain, and the GFS definitely seems to think so. It has the timing of that rain moving into central Georgia during the nighttime and overnight hours into very early on Saturday morning. But the good news is, and typically what we do see with these rain chances, if they do come in the overnight hours, then typically we will clear out as we transition into the morning and the afternoon hours on Saturday, but still maybe a few spotty sprinkles here and there. But it doesn't look like just one frontal boundary on its way this weekend. It actually looks like another will start to creep in as we go into Sunday, and that could also once again create some pretty scattered shower chances for the morning hours on Sunday. Maybe clear out as we head into the evening, but it does look like as we go into next Monday, we see signs of that frontal boundary clearing, and that's going to usher in some very chilly air for the beginning of the work week next week. We're talking morning low temperatures that could go down as low as the mid-30s. Not expecting anything in the way of frost or freeze alerts as of right now. If we do see the models maintain consistency somewhere in the mid-30s as we get closer and closer. Again, this is a week out in advance, so it's kind of anyone's best guess, but we could see some frost advisories issued. That will be something that we'll break down for you in more detail if we are to have those issued, especially for all those farmers that are trying to get the most out of this last little bit of harvest season. So now checking in on the tropics. Nothing worth talking about. We do have plenty of clouds out in the Atlantic Ocean. Doesn't look like we can see anything on the satellite imagery that's indicating, say, a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa. But we'll continue to monitor this as we go about the next month. But overall, tropics activity really goes down this time of year. But we did have Hurricane Melissa as of last week, which was a very strong storm pretty late in hurricane season. One of the latest storms that we've seen on record that has been that strong. But it did mark the 13th named storm that we saw throughout this year in terms of the Atlantic hurricane season. I know it says these numbers are as of October 31st. I updated this last Friday, and we haven't had any changes since then. But on average, we see 7 hurricanes in an Atlantic hurricane season. We've actually only seen 5 of those throughout the hurricane season, but the 5 hurricanes that have formed have been decently strong, especially 4 of those that have gotten up to major hurricane status. So 4 major hurricanes, that means category 3 or higher. That goes above our average of 3, which we typically see in an Atlantic hurricane season, and matches what Colorado State did forecast. And 3 of those 4 storms did reach category 5 status. And that, of course, most recently was Hurricane Melissa, adding on to Hurricane Umberto and Hurricane Aaron, which was way back in the month of August, if you may remember. That one kind of skirted up the east coast of the United States. Umberto was another one of those storms that was out in the middle of the Atlantic, but Hurricane Imelda actually over to the west got a little bit closer to our neck of the woods than Umberto did. So overall, these numbers don't look like it has been that active of a tropic season, but obviously that's not the case for everyone. The areas of the North Caribbean, Jamaica, southern Cuba, the Bahamas are definitely still feeling the impacts of that very strong storm that we saw last week. So of course, our thoughts continue to go out to those people in the Northern Caribbean, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed that tropics activity is done for the year. Typically, we don't see too much activity in the month of November. You could find our current date probably somewhere halfway between this October 20th and November 10th box. But take a look at this. As we go into November 10th, that's where we really see little to no tropical activity whatsoever. So we get through this next window of about a week into the future, don't have any tropical activity, it's not impossible for us to maybe see a named storm for the rest of hurricane season, but it is extremely unlikely, as we typically do not see the frequency of tropical activity like we would, say, in the middle of September. September 10th, that official peak, and hurricane season will go until the end of November. So on November 30th, we officially call it quits, and we won't worry about anything tropical-wise until we get into the beginning of next June. So we're going to take it over to your 7-day forecast and taking a look at that warming trend. We haven't seen the boxes this high in quite some time. We didn't get out of the 50s until I believe it was last Thursday. We hit a high temperature of 60, and then Halloween wasn't too much warmer. So it was very welcome to actually see some mid 70s and some upper 70s as we roll into the tail end of the work week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We start to see an increase in cloud cover and some rain chances as we head into the weekend. So that's why your morning low temperatures get a couple degrees above average, right there around the 50-degree mark Saturday and Sunday mornings. Still having a bit of a chill in the air, but not as much of a chill as you will see, or feel rather I should say, on Wednesday morning. And then after the frontal boundary passes through on Sunday, that is going to result in some very cool air for the beginning of the work week next week. We'll cross that bridge once we get there. The main thing that you need to know is grab the shades and dress in layers these next couple of days. 40s and 70s, that is very indicative of a fall-like forecast here in central Georgia, and it's something that you're really going to have to dress for two different seasons, because if you have to head out to work, say around 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. every day, then the temperatures will be mighty chilly. But if you have plans to be outside for your job or maybe going out to recess and such, you're not going to want that jacket whatsoever, with temperatures that feel absolutely perfect somewhere in the mid to upper 70s each and every afternoon, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And in those periods where you don't receive rain, Saturday and Sunday, high temperatures still somewhere in the mid to upper 70s, going to be an absolute treat. And I would definitely play it by ear. Have the rain jacket ready to go in case you do need it on Saturday and Sunday, but it does look like it will be that on and off rain over the course of this weekend, meaning there will be off periods and there will be dry times and peaks of sunshine in order to get some of those outdoor plans in. So that's where things stand. Pretty quiet week of weather. So obviously, we'll continue to keep you updated. If there's something that we do need to talk about, maybe look ahead a little bit farther into the future, go ahead and give you some guidelines and some tips for maybe some of those frost or freeze warnings that could come in the near future. But as of right now, it doesn't look like any of those are in store over the next week. Pretty smooth sailing and going to be a great atmosphere to be outside each and every afternoon. Just make sure to grab those sunglasses and make sure to continue to dress in those layers. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.